Good evening, and welcome to this very special event tonight called Golf Art Saved My Life and Georgetown Set Me Free. And I think I can safely say that there is no other event on earth in history that has ever had this title. My name is Marc Howard. I'm the director of the Prisons and Justice Initiative here at Georgetown. This event is co-sponsored by the Prisons and Justice Initiative and the Lecture Fund, and I'm very grateful to Kumail Islam and to the other members of the Lecture Fund for supporting this project and this event. I also want to thank, in his absence, President Jack DeGioia. He's overseas right now and couldn't come tonight, but he's been a tremendous supporter of the Prisons and Justice Initiative. We're just in our third year, some of you may know, but we've already established some amazing programs that are making a real difference in terms of criminal justice and prison reform. Among others, we recently launched the Scholars Program at the DC Jail, where we're offering 2 credit-bearing courses to incarcerated students who are also now Georgetown students and getting Georgetown credits. We're also offering 8 non-credit courses at the DC Jail, and the reviews that we're hearing from the warden, from the director of the Department of Corrections are extraordinary, that our program is changing the whole culture at the DC Jail, where the love of learning and the desire to participate in our programs has just been transformative. We also recently have, in partnership with the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizen Affairs, whose director, Brian Ferguson, is with us tonight, launched the Paralegal Program, which is for formerly incarcerated jailhouse lawyers who develop legal skills when they were incarcerated, when they come out to get a certificate in paralegal studies, and then to be hired by major DC law firms for a minimum of a year, and that's a revolutionary program. We're also very soon going to be launching the Pivot Program, which is for formerly incarcerated people who are going to study entrepreneurship and business at Georgetown while also working in related companies and getting support to start their own businesses. And we also have PJI PALS, which is a mentoring program for children who have an incarcerated parent. So we've done all of that in just a few years. And I think it's safe to say there's not a single university in the world that's as actively involved in the effort to reduce and end mass incarceration and to humanize and support people while they're incarcerated and after they're released as Georgetown. We're really leading the way nationally. And then on top of all that, and what brings us here tonight, there's the fact that Georgetown's administration authorized a totally unique and experimental class to take place last spring, where our students were working on real, live, wrongful conviction cases. And a lot of people thought these were mock cases that were sort of an exercise to understand how theoretically you might go about ending wrongful convictions. But they were real cases, and they were undergraduate students. Everyone actually in the media is always saying law students, law students. No, these were like 20, 21-year-old undergraduate students who were in this class. And here we are, just 6 months since that class ended, and we're celebrating the exoneration and the release of Valentino Dixon, and we're welcoming him here to Georgetown. And I don't think it's, I just get goosebumps saying it. I don't think it's possible to overstate just how unbelievable that is. It's surreal that we've been able to accomplish that so quickly. And so we hope that you and then many, many other people around the country and around the world will soon be seeing a documentary series that's being filmed about our class and about our project that will hopefully have multiple seasons, with season 2 starting in January with the next version of the class. I'd like to tell you a lot more about that class, but rather than hear it from me, I thought you might prefer to watch what's called the sizzle reel of the TV show. And this is something that's being right now discussed with major networks that are considering the series. So I think we'll now turn to this before we continue with the program. It's called Making an Exoneree.
Wrongful convictions, it's an epidemic. It's not isolated to one race. It affects poor people, it affects wealthy people, black, white.
The criminal justice system doesn't work like it does on Law and Order or CSI. Huge numbers of mistakes are being made every day.
Not everybody who's behind bars belongs there. Innocent until proven guilty is a great ideal if we could actually live up to it, But the sad reality is that we don't.
I spent 11 years in prison based on hearsay.
Every day in prison is a bad day. Marc Howard and I have been friends since I think I was 3 or 4 years old. We grew up together from lovey-dovey preschool. And, we continue to joke that, Marc went to Yale and I went to jail.
Marty himself was wrongfully convicted when we were seniors in high school. His parents were murdered. He was convicted of murdering his parents. And I'd always believed that he was innocent. And finally, I got involved with his legal team, and eventually it took him 17 and a half years, but we were able to prove his innocence.
6,338 days I was in prison before I was finally released on December 27th, 2007.
Marty is one of the greatest stories, of all when it comes to wrongful convictions. It's just, you can't believe it.
And Marty coming down here and being a co-professor with me for this course and for the goal of trying to get other people, other Martys, if you will, out of prison was just tremendous and really exciting.
The shooter was coming from that way.
I've been charged and convicted of triple murder that I did not commit.
I absolutely believe in John Moss's innocence.
In West Virginia, a medical expert is accused of botching lab tests, which were used to send innocent people to jail.
And John Moss III was one of the cases.
There's a door on the back of the house, but it's just a screen door. Pull open, and the whole backyard is covered in mud.
But of course, everybody knows that Paul Regetz had confessed.
I told him I didn't know anything about these murders. Only thing that I knew is what I've seen on TV. And when I didn't get something right, Mike Smith, he would hit me in the midsection.
John confessed. He was repeatedly punched by Trooper Smith, is what he said, and basically were like, if you don't say you did this, if you don't confess, this is where they'll find your body.
He interrogated me for a long time, but I was adamant that I was innocent. I was adamant that I didn't know anything about the crimes.
There's a lot because this is the place where my family was changed forever. They never had like an established story of like what actually went down.
They didn't even find the murder weapon. There was nothing that really forensically linked Kenneth to the crime the night of the murder.
What was your perception of Monfried, his defense lawyer, at the time of the trial?
He was, a seasoned, well thought of attorney.
He actually fell asleep during the trial.
A lot of attorneys listen with their eyes closed.
These are lawyers who, take oaths to uphold their oaths to their profession, and they cheat and steal and hide evidence.
Tim doesn't really know because he wasn't there. His best guess is that Justin Davis did it because he pled guilty.
And this was a case involving my son and a policeman's son, and the policeman was part of the investigation. They found casings on the site, and they only had the policeman's son's fingerprints on those shells. It's like, hold on, are you playing a game with my son's life?
I think America sees itself as such a gold standard in terms of human rights and justice, and then you see these instances where the system has so incredibly failed someone.
When they accused me of this, it hit me so hard, right? It just killed me, and I figured that it would all work itself out.
As a human being, when you read through this case, you say to yourself, obviously, well, geez, this doesn't seem right here.
The next day, somebody else goes on the news and says, it was me, it wasn't him.
The reason he died, because I didn't have any control of the automatic weapon at all.
There's no reason for him to say this other than he's the guy that did it.
I have, 8 people that cleared me the crime, and they've been All they did was try to discredit each witness.
When he gave me 39 years or whatever he gave me, I was just, I think I was in space.
Well, two things both of you keep saying is there's no physical evidence. What physical evidence should there have been? This is a shooting on the street.
Valentino's clothes were taken into evidence and his hands were tested for gunshot residue, and none of that evidence was presented in court.
A couple of weeks before Justin Baumgartner was murdered, he filed a police report saying that a green Ford had tried to run him off the road.
Would you happen to know where or who the people who live in apartment B are?
He said he shot Toriana. He didn't mean to kill him. He lost control of the gun.
I was never 100% sure that Kenneth Bond was the person that I saw that evening. I thought that I was maybe one small piece of a larger puzzle. His life should not have been taken away from him based on the testimony that I provided.
This isn't just a class. This isn't just about wrongful convictions. This is about people's lives.
The holy grail for us would obviously be one of our 5 cases, one of the 5 people we believe were wrongfully convicted, getting out, getting exonerated, and coming home.
They have done the calculations and have found that you are eligible for release today.
The students gave me the most hope that I've ever felt in 27 years. When the students got on board, it was like, this is gonna happen. The minute I mentioned Georgetown, they said, oh, you're going home. Nobody had any doubt. You know, nobody had any reservations. If I say, hey, my lawyer's putting in a post-conviction motion for me, and they were like, well, you know, we've been down that road before, yeah, we hope it happens. Oh yeah, Georgetown is involved? What? Oh, you out of here. This is how everybody reacted.
First off, Valentino, welcome home. Welcome to Georgetown. Welcome to the Hilltop. You're a Hoya now forever.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
Your story's so amazing, and I want us to go through it. But first, I just want to focus on the last 6 weeks. You know, you spent 1,400 weeks in prison for a crime you didn't commit.
Mm-hmm.
You've been home for 6 weeks.
All right.
Describe that feeling, describe life after release from prison after so long.
I can't describe it. You know, there's no words to describe, you know, what I felt these last 40 days. It's undescribable.
So much
you know,
happened.
I'm so happy. Yes, I'm so happy. I'm so grateful. I feel so blessed because I know that everybody's not going to make it up out of there. You know, and when I walked down those steps, I was just hoping that I didn't fall down the steps because my legs was weak. You know, and at that moment, you know, I just said to God in my mind, you can take me now. Because I just wanted to make it up out of there. I didn't want to die in prison.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at the same time, you're far from done.
Yeah.
Right? And your life is, in a way, is just starting again.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to say a little bit about your family. I mean, we have your daughter Valentina is here, your Aunt Margot, your mom, Barbara. They've stood by you for so long. I mean, Tina was 6 months old when you first got sent away. A lot of people in that position might have just forgotten, erased their father. But she not only didn't do that, but she stayed very, very close to you. And she became one of your strongest supporters and a leading advocate out on social media, really, really pushing the story of your innocence, despite the fact that so many were saying, no, your father's a murderer, your father's guilty. What does it mean? What vindication is it for you and for your family?
It's everything, you know. I'm so proud of her. She's a first grade school teacher, graduated from college, you know, and a father couldn't ask for more. You know, I took a trip from Denver to California last week, and I hadn't flown in 30 years. Anyway, I lost my luggage. I missed my flight. I'm running through the airport, so I said I got to call my baby girl. And they put me on another flight. She went and found my luggage and came picked me up at this other airport.
Wow.
You know, and I said, she's no longer a little girl. This is a grown woman now.
Yeah, and I know that as you've been adjusting to your new phone and new technology, the go-to person.
No, wait. She had no business buying me an iPhone 7. I want to throw that thing. Okay.
It's poisoning your life now, right?
She should have got me an Android or something else less complicated. Okay.
How about your mom?
My mom was the best mother on the planet. I'm her only child, you know, and I was arrested on her birthday. So can you imagine her? She hasn't had a birthday in 27 years. Her birthday was stolen away from her, you know, and she stood by me, you know, every day. And she went through cancer, three battles of cancer 3 different times, you know, and I didn't know if she was going to be alive for me to walk out of there. And I just kept praying to God, please just allow her to live to see me walk out. You know, and she's here today, and I don't think she's flown in 40 years, 50 years. But she got on a plane today to be here. Yeah. So she's the best.
Yeah. How about Margot, Barbara, stand up. Stand up.
No,
That's loyalty right there. Family.
It's a mother's love, right?
Yeah.
And a daughter's love for her father.
Yeah. Talk about now coming to Georgetown today. We walked around the campus, beautiful day. You got a sense, I think, of the history of this place and your connection to it. What does it mean to you to be here at Georgetown?
Well, first off, let me just say this, and I'm in pretty good shape because I took care of myself while I was in prison. I almost couldn't make this walk from all the way over there. Right. And I'm like, hold on a minute. I know my mother not going to be able to make it. So you know, it was crazy, but it was, you know, and I felt a little out of place. So I got on the phone just to talk to somebody so I wouldn't feel like what is this old guy running through here with this suit on for? But it's well worth it. And, you know, I'm just so grateful and thankful to be here and for everybody to embrace me. There's no feeling like it in the world.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your plans for the future. As we're going to see, and I hope people were able to see on the PowerPoint slideshow that was there before, Valentino is an extraordinarily gifted artist. And as we're going to see when we talk with Max Adler, that was a part of the story that led to him being released. And probably without that, he wouldn't have even gotten the attention and the notice. But let's talk about where you're going with your art. I mean, you've got, I believe, 1,600 drawings that you spent over 30 to 50 hours on each drawing.
Right.
That you're now in the process. We have a website that was created. I want to thank Kyle Ratner and Matt Fritchkin who helped develop that website that has just gone live, valentinodixon.com. Please check it out. Please consider holiday gifts also. Makes for great gifts. Beautiful artwork, and that's just a fraction, a sample of the work that you've done. Is art going to be a central part of your life going forward?
Always. Art is what kept me strong, you know. It invigorated my spirit, you know. And see, prison is a place that's designed to break your soul and your spirit, you know. And I've seen many spirits broken in prison. I've had friends that committed suicide, you know. And art was the one thing that kept me going besides prayer. It just kept my mind occupied and hopeful. And without it, you know, I don't think I would be up here right now, even being able to express myself the way I am, you know.
And you spent 10 to 12 hours a day in prison drawing.
At least for the last 20 years.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Most of these people are.
Yeah, I didn't take no days off.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. I mean, the first 7 years, I was in such a state of depression that I didn't pick up a pencil or paper the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, I had an uncle that encouraged me to get back into the drawing, because I used to draw as a kid.
Right. Yeah. And now, going forward, you also have a bigger platform now because your story is incredible, and you've been emerging as a voice for criminal justice reform. One of the first things you said, and I was right there, your first interview after walking out was talking about sentencing reform, about criminal justice reform, about all the problems with our prison system.
Right.
How do you see your role in that larger movement?
Well, I hope to bring a different perspective. Like, even after I just looked at the short film, the look on my face, I was still upset, you know, because I was happy for myself and my family, but I know that there's, you know, millions of people out there that's still suffering, you know, so I couldn't really celebrate, because I know there's a lot of work to do. And, you know, my role is just to educate people that wouldn't necessarily be involved in the criminal justice system, you know, because unless you have a family member or a close, you know, relative or somebody that you're close with, have legal problems or end up in the penitentiary, you'll never really know, because it won't hit that heart, you know, close to the heart.
Right.
You know, so I just want to be able to enlighten people, you know, on the system is not designed or equipped to give the poor person a fair trial, you know, and that alone is the injustice. It's not just a civil rights violation for black and white. You know, it's a constitutional violation, but more than anything, it's a human rights issue, you know, and in comparison to other countries in the sentencing guidelines, you know, it's not even close, you know, and and we need to try to appeal to lawmakers in a different type of way, you know, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. We need to try to get them to understand that everyone, you know, deserves the same care and compassion and concern, you know, as the next human being. And sometimes I believe that prosecutors and judges only care about those that's inside that group, that inner circle, you know, and it's easy to turn a blind eye to the suffering of others.
Yeah.
So my role would be to not only explain that, you know, the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, you know, it's supposed to protect us against cruel and unusual punishment. You know, when you look at these sentencing laws, it does the opposite. And so, you know, I came from the hood. You know, I grew up in the hood, a bad place, and I don't know any of my childhood friends that didn't end up in the system. I mean, the whole neighborhood was targeted. This is how you end up with mass incarceration, you know, and, you know, people are only human, you know, people make mistakes, you know, but in most cases, they can come back from it. You know, and sometimes when people make one mistake, they don't get a second chance, and that's just not right.
Yeah.
You know, so I want to be able to appeal to them in a different type of way that, you know, we could do better. You know, Martin Luther King said it best. He said, you know, people are victims of intellectual and spiritual blindness. They know not what they do. You know, he said that even though slave owners were not necessarily bad or evil people, they were just blind. You know, and we know that the system sometimes as a whole can be built on greed, you know, and investments. And it's a fierce resistance whenever you try to fight against prison reform or fight for prison reform, you know, because people have a lot to lose, you know, and, you know, we need to try to reach them in a human, where's the humanity? In that type of sense that as Americans, right, we see ourselves as the leader of all nations. And that's just a reality, you know, that we have the better way of doing things. And that's just not always the case.
Right.
Okay. And this is, it's about putting the egos aside and not thinking about the careers and think about your fellow human being.
Yeah, that's right. I think you've already made clear to everyone, one, that you have an amazing story, two, that you're an extraordinarily talented artist, and three, that you're an inspirational leader in the making. And that's something I think we're going to see a lot of you. I'd love to keep going in this direction, but I now want to take a step back, and I want to invite up to the stage some of the key players who helped to achieve your freedom. So I want to invite Max Adler editorial director of Golf Digest. Marty Tankleff, adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Ellie Goonetillake, Georgetown College, class of 18. Julie Fragonas,
Marty.
former exchange student, now in France. And Naoya Johnson, former exchange student, now back in Japan.
Give me my hugs. You know, I give my hug. Okay. Come on, come on. All right.
So I want to start with you, Max, and also with Valentino to bring in the story because, Max, you're the editorial director of a publication. I don't want to demean it or denigrate it in any way, but it's not one, Golf Digest, that's usually associated with breaking news, criminal justice stories, solving problems of injustice in the world. You might perhaps argue even the opposite, but I won't go there. So you had this extraordinary situation where you had this column that was called Golf Saved My Life. And in that, you would get stories sometimes from a military veteran who'd lost a limb and talking about the role of golf and just feeling normal again and so on. And one day, you get a letter from Attica Prison. Why don't you describe a little bit what was inside and your reaction to it?
Sure. It was remembering 7 years ago now. It's hard to get the exact chronology, but in a short span of time, I got an email from Valentina telling me a bit about her dad, and then I go into the office one day, and there's a white envelope postmarked from Attica Correctional Facility, and inside is this meticulously handwritten letter with a little small drawing of a golf putting green. And Valentino, he explains to me that despite having never set foot on a golf course, despite never having hit a golf ball, the game is saving his life. And that caught my interest. How could this possibly be true? And he didn't really, delve into the matter of his case too much.
Wasn't there a little PS, by the way, I'm innocent?
Yeah, kind of a PS. It took up about 2 lines. I think he didn't want to scare me off. Right. But, it piqued my interest, and when we talked on the phone, and I went up to visit him, and, he kind of poured his heart out about his case and everything that had happened. And, as a journalist, it's funny, in golf, the rule that settles all disputes, even at the highest levels of the game, when millions of dollars are at stake, is you always take someone at their word. Mm-hmm. And in journalism, it's the exact opposite. Right. You believe nobody. Yeah. So I had to start off with not believing you. But Valentino's mother, Barbara, shipped me his case file and 2 cardboard fruit boxes, and I was able to get some more from the public records and started digging into it, because if we were going to devote pages into the magazine and say that this guy was innocent, we really had to make sure, and I started to wade through it. And I'm sure you all would have waded through it much faster. But I just, slowly came to the realization that you guys produce a lot of paperwork in the legal system. And in this case, the truth had sort of gotten lost.
Yeah. Now, Valentino, when you sent that letter and those drawings, were you thinking this could be kind of cool to get something in this column in Golf Digest and maybe get my artwork noticed? Or were you thinking this could be my ticket out because if I get this attention, my story might get heard? Were you already going there in your mind?
When all of your appeals are denied, I felt like my only avenue was the media. Yeah. Okay. And when the warden asked me to draw his favorite golf course.
Yeah, so tell this story. Yeah, because, not everyone necessarily knows that.
Yeah, I was known as the artist in Attica. I spent 25 years in Attica, 27 years total in prison. So everybody knew that I was the artist, because whenever you come past my cell, I'm drawing all day long. And if I'm not drawing, they would ask me, is something wrong? I'm just taking a break. So the warden came by one day and he says, hey, Dixon, he knew me by my name. He says, you think you can draw my favorite golf course? I said, all right, bring it in. I never golfed before, know nothing about golf. Drew it, he loved it. That was supposed to be the end of it. My neighbor, guy named Adam, he says, hey, I think you should draw some more golf courses. I said, Adam, what are you talking about? I'm a black man from the hood, never golfed before. I won't have no credibility if I start drawing golf courses, okay? You know, now fast forward a week later, I'm laying in my bunk. I said, you know what? He might have, he might be onto something, because I had drawn everything under the sun. You know, and at that time I had over 1,000 drawings that I had saved up. So I said, you know what? What's the harm in it? Give me some old magazines. He brought me some old issues. I started drawing the golf courses. Whenever I put my mind to something, I don't know how to stop. For, I think, 6, 7 months, all I did was draw golf courses every day. So I finally decided to read some of the columns in there. And this is when I came across Max's column. And the stories were so touching, because his column was named Golf Saved My Life. You know, so I started to, say, oh, wow, you know what, golf is saving my life right now, because it's giving me something to do, and it's keeping my mind focused, because in prison you have a fragile mind. You don't know when you're going to snap. You know, I'm strong today, but tomorrow I might want to kill myself, and I've had friends do that. So I said, you know what, this is really helping me, hang in there. So this is when I wrote him and told him that golf was saving my life.
Yeah. Max, when you wrote that article, and then it did get a very positive response, it got discussed and got shared and so on, did you think I might be really playing an active role in getting an innocent person out of prison? Or did you think this is a really cool investigative journalism project, and then I'm moving on and going back to the Ryder Cup or whatever? I mean, how actively did you feel engaged with the goal of pushing to his exoneration?
Quite actively, but also quite naively, because watching this video and also what I've learned from you and Marty, that, wrongful convictions and overturning them, I mean, it's just a black hole. And I thought, oh, here's this, pretty thorough, whatever it was, 5,000-word presentation of the facts, and it's just so overwhelmingly obvious, Lamar Scott's confession aside, every single factor of the case that this man is innocent. This should smartly lead to a well-connected golfer getting in touch with the right person in power who knows how to move levers in the system. And it took a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah. Now, how much of it, and both your reaction and then the response of readers and supporters, had to do with just how supremely talented he is as an artist? In other words, if it had been Golf Saved My Life and I draw and it's sort of very mediocre, let's say, you know what I mean? But it's like, it's a nice story still, right? He likes golf, he's from Buffalo, from the hood, and so on. There still could have been that element. But when people saw those drawings, they're just so beautiful that I think that's really brought people in. If they'd been mediocre, what do you think would have happened? I mean, in other words, did his talent play a role in the receptiveness to his innocence?
I think hugely so. I like to think that myself, personally, if the art had been mediocre, I still would have been captivated by the story.
Yeah.
In college, I was actually an art major and a golfer, so I love golf, I love art, but I've always hated golf art. It's like really kitschy, it's got a bad look.
I never knew golf art was a thing.
It's
what is
enough of a
art?
thing. Go to enough clubhouses, you'll see it.
Okay.
But Valentino's work, it was surreal. It's got this sort of sublime quality to it. Obviously, you can't look at it without thinking about the place and situation in which it was made. But I think you're totally right that the power of the images and the power of his talent certainly helped people take that first look, because that first look is what's so important.
The first look was actually the drawings, in a way.
Yeah.
First look at the case was through the drawings of many people.
So, yeah, I mean, it's fantastic that Valentino has such talent and such charisma, because there are probably a lot of other people wrongfully convicted who don't.
That's right, yeah. I want to then move on to Marty now, because of all the people in this room, there are very few. I know Brian Ferguson is one, and I think Anthony Wilson is here, who's experienced as well, but you're one of the few, along with Valentino, who really knows what it's like to be wrongfully convicted, sitting in prison. And one thing I say to my students in general is that I think prison conditions overall are horrific for people, whether they're guilty or innocent, and we have a real human rights crisis in terms of how we treat people, period. But I think everyone can agree that when you're in that position for something you did not do, nothing can be worse. And Marty, when you first heard about Valentino's case, it was around 2012. I think it was even before the Golf Digest. Talk a little bit about
I think it was actually right around the Golf
Okay,
Digest.
okay. So that did play a role.
Because I think what ended up happening was the lawyer that I worked for got interested in the case because he was a golfer and read the article. And while I was working at this law firm, I was a student at Editorial Law School, and we set up a wrongful conviction externship program where two students, Catherine and Alex, worked on Valentino's case, and I kind of supervised them at the firm. And I remember one of the first conversations I had with Valentino, I said to him, I'm never going to give up on you. No matter where this case goes, I'll never give up on you, because I believed in him.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a bond, there's a fellowship. I've seen this now with you, Marty, over the years, over the now almost 11 years since you've been out, between other exonerees. Because there's something, you look at each other and you know what the other person's been through that no one else can actually get. I'm wondering if you could describe that. I want to hear from Valentino.
It is true. I mean, I you know, when I saw Valentino trying to figure out how to use a cell phone today, I was sat back and I said, I went through that.
I remember I was next to you in that.
Mark
Steve
actually,
Braga was there too.
Steve Braga is sitting here, who was one of my lawyers at Ford for 15 years.
15 years.
And Mark flew back from France the day I got out. And I remember somebody set up an email for me and a cell phone. And back then I had a flip phone. It was the first phone I had.
You had a BlackBerry.
That was the second one.
Oh, was it?
The second one. I know nobody remembers BlackBerries. But I remember everything was a learning experience. From being in prison, you have access to, let's say, 3 boxes of cereal, and you go to a supermarket and there's an entire aisle. You're in prison, you're limited to the type of clothing you can wear, and you go into a clothing store and it's a sensory overload. I mean, one of the worst things for me was I was being interviewed by Rosanna Scotto in New York City, and we were on the street, and I said, man, why are all these people talking to themselves? I said, I thought I left the crazy people behind. And she started laughing. She goes, what do you mean? I go, look, they're all talking to themselves. And she goes, no, they're Bluetooths. And I said, what the hell's a Bluetooth? You know, I mean, you think about 18 years, I mean, no, there was no such thing as a Bluetooth. There was, you know, the cell phones were these big monstrosity boxes when I went in. So, and I remember Valentino had a conversation with him before he got out. I said, take it slow. I said, because there's going to be every little experience, there's going to be some challenge. From reacclimation to society to, like you said, walking around today, getting a driver's license. I walked into the DMV and they wanted 6 forms of ID. They said, do you have a canceled check? And I said, I don't think the Department of Corrections actually want to give me that. They said, do you have a rental agreement? I said, my rent was all included. They said, do you have anything else? I said, I have a newspaper article. And I was fortunate enough to have a Hofstra ID card, a birth certificate, and I actually had to get a supervisor come over and waive it. I mean, there were even challenges. A year after my conviction, I was trying to do a semester abroad, and I wanted to get a passport, and they said, you're a convicted felon. I said, what do you mean? The records hadn't been cleaned up, so we actually had to figure out a way to do it quickly so I could do a semester abroad. I mean, so everything is a progress, it's a challenge. I mean, most people would never believe I'm almost free 11 years, that I was actually in prison for almost 18 years.
Yeah. Actually, since Steve Braga's here, I will mention one of the things I heard from your supporters is that after you got out and you were on the phone, you were on email, constant. Some of them were like, it was a lot easier when Marty was still in prison.
And the other comment was, that, thank God I didn't have email in prison because I probably would have shut the servers down.
Yeah. Valentino, I want to ask you about Marty, and again, the bond between exonerees. When you first found out that Marty was involved in an effort to help you become cleared and exonerated and released, did that mean something special to you? What did that mean to you, knowing that it was somebody who actually got it, really got it personally?
When Marty called my mom, okay, we had tried to reach out to the governor several times. Max, you know, sent letters.
for clemency.
You know, yeah, a lot of people sent letters to him. You know, a pardon and clemency. You know, we was just trying to get me out of there. It's like just get him out of here any type of way. Okay, and that was denied. So a week later, here come Marty with the phone call. Okay, and that phone call, I can't describe what it did to me and my soul. But when he explained to me that the Georgetown students was, you know, on board, then it just changed our lives immediately. We just said, this is going to happen. Yeah. You know, I didn't have no doubt about it. Something just told me it's going to happen now. Yeah. You know, you get denied and you get denied, you get denied, you get denied. If you keep fighting, at some point, you know what it's going to happen. You know, and that's just from, you know, throughout history, just observing many people who had challenges and obstacles that they had to overcome. You know, and you know, you see people fight and you fight and you fight, and then sooner or later they'll get the relief. You know, only time you won't get that relief, I believe, is when you give up.
Marty, I want to ask you, having been present for Valentino's exoneration when he walked out of prison, right? I was present for both of yours, but in the similar role, which is an easy role, which is on the outside and you just get to enjoy it. I had all kinds of flashbacks, remembering when it was you coming out, and I had similar feelings, similar emotions. What was it like for you, having actually been there and then suddenly being on the outside? Because you knew all those little steps that Valentino was going through in his mind, what was coming. Talk about that, how you related to him through the process of exoneration.
Even before him walking out the door, though, I was concerned because I was in communication with his lawyers. And there was a problem with him getting out with the Department of Corrections. And they said, Marty, can you reach out to somebody? And it was at that very moment I kind of felt this sense of, wait a minute, there's something I can do once again. And all of a sudden I was texting everyone I could imagine I knew in corrections. I was leaving messages. And all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, I got a text. He's on his way out. And it was that moment of everything I wanted in life, which was to be able to walk someone out of prison, was going to happen. And seeing him just kind of on the top of the stairs, if you kind of look at his face, I think I probably had the same look, like, is this really happening? And in the back of my head, I kept thinking, you know, if not for people like Steve and Barry and Jennifer and Roberto giving me the opportunity to get my own freedom back, I wouldn't be able to pay it forward so Valentino and others could get their life back. And seeing his family, especially Valentina, because she and I had a lot of conversations beforehand, it was just remarkable. I mean, you know, I look at an exoneration as almost like a rebirth, because when society has taken someone away for so many years, you get to start over. If you think about 27 years, how many people in this room are under 27 years old? Imagine losing your entire life of 27 years. Imagine everything that's happened in 27 years that you've just been accustomed to. Now think of Valentino coming out into the world knowing that a cell phone is more powerful than a Commodore 64 or an Apple IIe, or now you don't have to go to the movie theaters. You've got Hulu and Netflix, and you can actually just watch everything on a tablet or a phone. And to give somebody the opportunity to travel again. And it really wasn't just me. I mean, to me, I was part of a team. It was Max, it was Mark, it was these amazing students here. It was Don Thompson, it was Alan Rosenthal, and it was even Mr. Flynn, the DA. Everybody had a role to make sure the system worked. Because when you incarcerate someone who's innocent, the system is failing. And until we, as a society, stop accepting the failures of the system, we're going to have these ongoing problems. And I think people like myself, people like Valentino, we will be those warriors that will keep giving back.
Right. One of the amazing things I think about exonerees, and you're all seeing a little bit of this right now, is that while I think you would expect that they would just be bitter and angry for all those years that were stolen and often done through dishonesty and corruption, you know. But somehow, and I saw this first through Marty, and now I've seen it through so many others, and Brian Ferguson is the same, which is they're some of the most optimistic, upbeat people I know, which is that they want to first make the most of their life. They want to look forward, not backwards. And second, they want to help other people. And they want to get on board in terms of telling their story, but through their story, sending a positive message that will help other people who are in their predicament or who are incarcerated in general, unjustly or often excessively long periods of time under terrible conditions. So I'm wondering for you, Valentino, do you feel like you are coming into this new position in a way as an exoneree where you want to contribute to the movement and do what Marty's been doing for you to others?
Of course. I was trying to remember this quote that Nelson Mandela said, you know, and I might have maybe a word or two off. Try to get it word for word. He said, to believe in the impossible and then make it happen. So my thing is this, that we can accomplish this. You know, we can change it rather now than later. But the approach has to be full court pressure, you know. Mm-hmm. You can send but so many letters, okay? One of the things that I believe played an instrumental role in me being released was the video that they put together, making it exoneree, okay? Because it caught the attention of the DA's office and many others, you know, and without that documentary, the process would have moved along a lot slower, okay? And my observation of life and how things get done is once you guys said that you were doing a documentary, and I said, right on, this is gonna move along a lot quicker. Yeah. It's not gonna take 3 years. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah. That it would, you know, that it could take the 6 months that it took. Right. Yeah. So I believe that at this stage, you know, there has to be, you know, a mobilization of people, bringing people together, and also a campaign and a strategy on how to make people own their shame, okay? Because nobody should be more powerful than the truth, no matter what position they hold, okay? And it's not about, you know, embarrassing anybody. It's just, you know, getting them to see that, you know, this is not right. And keeping it simple, you know, without all the political mass incarceration rhetoric. You know, right. Keep it simple. This is what we need to do, and this is why we need to do it.
Right, right, okay. I want to turn now to the students, and want to highlight again 3 undergraduate students, 2 of them exchange students from Japan and France, who come for a year to Georgetown, who take this really bizarre sounding class that has a really strange application process. And by the way, take note if you're interested for next semester, and I suspect a few people may be, it's a video application. You end up in this class, and we come on the, well, actually before the class even started, before the winter break, we sent all the students in the class, there were 16 students, summaries of 8 different cases. And we wanted you to do some research on them, to think about them, and then come on the first day, and we were going to discuss the 8, and we were going to pick the 5. And we were going to allocate the different students into the group so we'd hit the ground running from basically day 1. And the 3 of you chose Valentino Dixon as your #1 choice without any hesitation, and you were all in from day 1. And maybe you start, Ellie, talk a little bit about how that came to be. What was it about Valentino's case that stood out to you and made you want to work on it and help set him free?
I think the art element for me was so inspiring. Like talking to Valentino, he draws for like sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day, and to use that as a coping mechanism and to put all his energy and passion into something he's so good at and something that's so beautiful was really inspiring to me. I think also this case was just so incredibly compelling considering the facts of it. The fact that someone had confessed 2 days after the crime was kind of unprecedented to me. It seemed just unfathomable that someone would be in prison when the real killer confessed the crime numerous times over the years. And it seems like something had to be done about that, so I felt connected to it from the beginning, because I felt like Valentino is so passionate about art, and he draws these golf courses despite having never been on one in his life. I think that really appealed to me, and then the facts of the case, how he's convicted on no physical evidence, like 3 witness testimonies are completely flawed. I think that just really stuck out to me, and I really just wanted to help in any way I could.
Yeah. How about you, Julie? What was it about Valentino's case?
I think that what I wanted, it was to fight and work with someone that I would be inspired by. And when I saw this documentary about Valentino's case, when I saw him talking, when I saw Le Mascot, I knew that I wanted to work for him, not just because of the facts, not just because he's a really talented person, but also because he's an inspiring person, he's passionate, and I really needed to have the motivation to work with someone that I would be inspired by.
Right. And we should say also that Golf Digest, Max wrote this incredible article with a lot of the imagery, but then the Golf Channel did a, I think, 8-minute documentary that you were able to find when you're doing your research over the break. So in 10 minutes, yeah. So that also shows kind of the power of a documentary to get you to believe in his story, to then create another documentary that would go to the next level. Naoya, you want to add about drew you to Valentino?
Kind of similar to Ellie, but when I was looking into the case, it did not make sense at all. So there was this other person confessing multiple times on film. There were obviously unreliable witness testimonies that was solely used to convict Valentino. I was like, oh, this doesn't even make sense. It won't even be a movie. It's that crazy, because a movie would have to make sense, because otherwise we're not going to watch it. It was crazier than that for me. I was like, oh, this doesn't make sense at all. I need to, I want to get involved in it. And then on top of that, him going through that situation, he's drawing these crazy good artworks, and I was really interested in how powerful he is and how, how powerful he is. Yeah.
Now, we have to talk about the fact that you're all 3 international students. I mean, Ellie, you were a 4-year Georgetown undergraduate, obviously, but from my perspective, when we were sort of allocating the cases, we certainly weren't trying to group you in any respect. And it just came out that way, and I remember thinking, oh, wow, okay, the 3 foreign students in the class are working together. That's weird, but didn't really think much of it. I'm wondering, did that somehow play a role either in your passion for the fact that you had all grown up in another system, very different, and all 3 different from the US in different ways? Did that somehow, was it a factor either in your interest in the case or in the passion you brought to the case, that you came sort of as outsiders in a sense?
Yeah, I think for sure I definitely wanted to just learn more about the justice system, because it does seem so confusing on a first-hand look at the case that this hadn't been overturned yet. I think that definitely attracted me. I think also just wanting to explore different avenues that Valentino would have, whether it be clemency or 440 motion. I wanted to find out about it. I mean, it seems like in the system, it's so biased towards the original conviction. Like, it's harder and harder with every court to overturn it. And for me, that just seems so unfair, and it made me want to explore the system more and try to get a result from it. But yeah, I think that was my perspective on it.
I'm glad she said something just
now. Go ahead.
She mentioned clemency. When they got on board, I says, no, clemency is off the table.
Yeah, you left a voicemail.
No.
We all heard it.
Valentino left me a voicemail that basically say, no ifs, ands, or buts will I ever take it. He goes, I want to walk out as an innocent man, and that's it.
Yeah, because
and
I
that voicemail, I played it for.
Oh yeah, we all.
And we said to us, that was just a reaffirmation of his innocence.
Yeah.
Because when people talk about certain aspects of their case, and they express a level of passion or anger, or determination, or just consistency, it just adds to their innocence.
Yeah. Did you want to say more on that?
No, that was it.
Yeah.
You know, I had so much faith in Georgetown as a whole that when Ellie and Julie mentioned clemency, I said, no way, it's done.
Yeah.
They didn't give it to me. Now we're going all the way
that caused a little bit of a crisis because there was a little while where we were thinking,
right,
overturning a wrongful conviction in general is so unbelievably hard. And we thought, hey, maybe clemency, there's a better shot.
I know you did.
And we were starting to say, let's push for it. And then you closed that door, and we thought, oh, okay.
I know they thought I was a little nuts because I did such a fast switch, but my spirit told me, no, that's done now. We're going
for the home run.
That's right.
It was a stressful day for us.
That was a stressful day, yes. Julie, you want to add? Just the foreign element, coming from France, very different system.
Yeah, I think when you're a U.S. citizen and you know about the conditions and all the innocent person in prison, you're already angry. But maybe that coming from systems where it's even less the case and where it's less usual, I think that being that angry and that passionate may have helped us go through the challenges because we weren't used to it, and each time we were talking to witnesses, talking to the prosecutor, and when we were hearing all these crazy things, we just thought, like, we knew that we could not give up.
Yeah, for me, so I grew up in Japan, and so coming here, the first thing was like, the first thought I had taking this course was there's already so much social awareness towards different problems that happens in relation to the criminal justice system. Like in Japan, there's not that much awareness towards like wrongful convictions. That doesn't mean it never happens. It just means that we never look into it, or no one really gets released after they're wrongfully convicted. So the first thought I had was like, oh my God, this is wonderful in the sense that there's so many people trying to work on it, but it's also horrible that there's so many people that are wrongfully convicted in this country. And for me, in the first step, it was, I think because I was from Japan, it was more shocking for me than maybe other people. So that was like one of my biggest motivations to even take part in this class. So I think in that sense, I think me.
Yeah, I remember that in your video application as well.
Yeah.
Valentino, so I know you talked in the video that we just saw about how once Georgetown was on board, you knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Did you have any other voices, either your own inside your head or others, who were saying, come on, man, you just got 3 undergrads doing a little class project. This is a joke. This isn't going to do anything. Don't get your hopes up. These are just 3 kids. What can they do? Did you ever have anyone say that, or did you ever think that for a minute?
No.
Because that would have been that would have been a rational response.
Right. Well, let me just say this, right? As I would speak with them over the phone, right?
And you did that almost every day for a while.
Yeah, it was difficult in the beginning because we were not on the same page.
Yeah.
I said, look, they need to catch up. They need to come all the way up here, And eventually they did get up here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But what I did is that once you guys came on board, it was really about the whole university is supporting this. It's, not just the students.
Yeah.
And that's how I would present it.
Right.
Even if that wasn't the case, in my mind it was.
Yeah.
And that's what kept me
because Marc's the university.
Open. That's right. The whole university, and that's, but I'm gonna be honest with you. Whenever you mention Georgetown, I haven't met one person that could even think about saying, so what?
Even upstate New York? That's Syracuse territory.
I haven't met one person, And even not knowing much about this university before this, except for when the last time we won a championship was 1985.
There we go.
I just knew that it was something great about this place,
Yeah.
And I can't describe it no different.
Right. So to the students now again, I don't know if you actually realize or if it's capable of sinking in at this stage in your lives, but this is something, which again, I can point to Steve Braga, who's had a few, and they're the greatest achievements of his life, and I've heard him describe it that way, exonerations. But this is something that is just monumental. This is something that many lawyers would just dream of having happen once, and you had it at like 20 or 21 years old, and you're just starting law school. And I think that already is mind-boggling, that you're starting law school, and imagine like going around the room introducing yourself, and what did you do last spring or summer? Oh, yeah, I got someone out of prison who was wrongfully convicted for 27 years. But do you realize that this is, in a way, a life-defining and perhaps career-defining achievement?
I mean, I think it's definitely hard to have that sink in, but I think what's interesting about it is that it seems like such a huge achievement for students, but I think it almost happened because we were students, you know? I think us going to meet the lead prosecutor and him very much thinking this would be an informal meeting where we go over some facts about a case, and us actually knowing all the trial details really played in our favor, and then he was very taken aback and then ends up revealing one of the most pivotal pieces of evidence that we presented.
So let's drill in on that. I mean, we saw a little bit of that in the video, but I just want to make that clear. I mean, the original prosecutor at Valentino's trial, right, who prosecuted Valentino despite the fact that Lamar Scott had confessed multiple times, despite the fact that witnesses were very shaky and later recanted and were shown to have had police pressure and so on, that when students interviewed him, and somehow he agreed to be interviewed, probably because he thought, they're just a couple, undergrads, and I'll just do their little project, I'll do a little interview. And I've seen the full video, and they are running circles around him, and he is sweating because they know the case better than he does. And suddenly...
Wait, let me say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
My attorney at the time, he advised me, he says, I don't think they should have an interview with the DA. You remember that? I says, no, they're going to have an interview with him.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. I just felt like, it needed to happen.
You overruled.
Oh, of course. I felt like it needed to happen. I said, no, it's going to be an interview. And no, because now you...
Yeah, no, and so both interviews, I mean, the original prosecutor, who's now retired, but who revealed in that interview that they had conducted gunpowder residue testing on Valentino's hands and clothing, and that it had come back negative, which was never revealed to the defense. And that is what, for some of my students here, what is that? Brady violation, constitutional violation. That alone is reversible, although it doesn't happen enough, unfortunately, that they get reversed, because Brady violations happen all the time. So that was a massive development that became a central argument in the final appeal that led to Valentino being released. So I just want to commend you, but also maybe want to ask you to relive that moment. Julie and Ellie, you were both in that room, and could you feel his nervousness? I mean, it's so visible. He's flustered.
Yeah, I think, the three of us were extremely nervous, and we were, there was like this tension that the people who were in the room, they felt, because it was really like two sides who couldn't have any dialogue, because he was so confused and trying to lie to himself and to us, and we were telling him the facts, and he would just not believe us, and so I think that's when the tension really grew, and we didn't even realize what like the gunshot residue thing, because he was telling these terrible things like witnesses should not be scared of policemen, they should always tell the truth. Right.
Yeah, I remember that. We were completely baffled by a couple of things he said. Like, one of the witness testimonies, the guy was on a mixture of like crack cocaine, marijuana, and alcohol. And we asked him about that because that was one of the key testimonies that convicted Valentino. And he said that he thought that would improve someone's judgment, like a mixture of those substances. So he was taken aback.
That is extraordinary.
By those kind of statements, and it wasn't until we looked back on the tape where he said that a gunshot residue test had taken place and come back negative that really clicked in our mind how important that would be. And soon enough, Don Thompson, Valentino's lawyer, jumped on that, and it made it to the final appeal.
Yeah. I think they said that Julie and Ellie were like two pit bulls
yeah.
going after this seasoned prosecutor, and the camera guys were just like unbelievable. They said these two were just
coming out of both directions, the two of them.
Well, I seen it myself. You could see it in their
the
way they were looking at him. I said, whoa.
I know. And then he's like a deer in headlights, and then he slipped up.
Right.
right? He lost his own narrative. Gave way.
I decided to be the camera guy.
Yeah.
Because I knew they would be really good at confronting. I'm not good at that, so I'll be like holding the camera. And when he made crazy statements, we were all like, oh my God. And I was doing that behind the camera. Yeah, so great job, guys. Yeah.
And then there was the interview with the current DA, right, John Flynn. And that's, again, something that it's not clear to me he would have agreed to that interview had he known the larger ramifications at the time. And you talked about the case really knowledgeably. He, I think, was forced to acknowledge the reality, which was that it seemed ludicrous that Valentino was still in prison. And then he made a promise, again, on camera, which was, I will take a long, hard, thorough, honest look at the case and be fair in how I deal with it. And I'm not saying that had he not had that interview, he automatically wouldn't have done that, but I think that it made it that he had to at that point. And I think, again, there's something that was disarming about undergraduate students, foreign students, maybe that adds to it, I don't know, but that had these really powerful effects in those two interviews. Do you remember that interview too, realizing, I mean, how unusual that was to have the sitting district attorney agree to an interview on camera with you like that and give you a lot of time and talk openly like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised that we even got that interview. I remember calling his office every day for weeks to try and arrange that.
See, that's persistence right there.
Yeah.
That's like drawing for 12 hours in a cell. That's what you were doing.
Yeah, and they had the motion, they had information with them, and I was pretty sure that they weren't really paying too much attention to it. That was my impression. And then we finally arranged this interview for when we would be in Buffalo. John Flynn was a new DA who had set up a wrongful conviction unit, so I feel like he felt particular pressure to hold himself to a certain standard. And he had to prepare for this interview that we arranged, and we told him we were doing a documentary, so he really had to prepare for the interview. And then he read all the cases, and I think that it really hit home for him how egregious this whole thing was, and that it was unfair. And he promised us on camera that he would give the case his full consideration.
Yeah.
At first, I think we considered him as an enemy, so we were ready to go to the confrontation too. And during the interview, when he says, I think it's unbelievable that he's in prison, that a jury could find him guilty, I think that's a moment where we really realized that he would probably get out.
Yeah. And did you think it would happen as quickly as it did? No.
No, I didn't. I mean, I was very optimistic at the end of the semester because I felt glad that it was now kind of a waiting game. The motion was being filed, and then we would have to wait and see. But at the beginning of the class, I would never have imagined such a thing would happen. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, when we were there, I spoke to the two assistant DAs that actually did a lot of the investigation, and Marc was there. And they said it was the most emotional work that they'd ever done. And the female assistant DA said, I've tried murderers, rapists, child molesters, robbers. And she goes, this was the most difficult case I ever had. She goes, because we knew that there was somebody who was potentially innocent sitting in prison when we first started. She goes, there were nights I couldn't sleep. And she goes, it's the most rewarding work I've done in, I think, 14 years as a prosecutor. So it just goes to show you that sometimes that this system can work.
And Valentino, and then we're going to have some special guests join us.
Okay. Well, I was a little upset, even when John Flynn said that he said he would investigate and take into consideration, et cetera, et cetera. Right.
You didn't believe it?
No, I was upset that, these are smart, intelligent, educated people, Once you read my file, then you know that I didn't commit this crime. And I felt at the time like, you already know I didn't commit this crime. Why do you need to take any longer?
Right, you thought you should be out
of course.
May 1st.
But
he said that.
The following week.
Yeah. What would take so long? Okay, we are now going to transition to bring in a few special guests who are not here with us physically in the room, but who are going to be joining us by voice. And I'd like to ask for the next slide to give a little bit of context, because this project for us has
one happy ending, which is that Valentino Dixon has now been released. But we have 3 other people who are still languishing in prison, who are equally innocent. We believe in them just as strongly, and we will not rest until they come out as well. And so I'd like to, are we ready? We're gonna, hopefully the technology will work.
All right, Tim, you're on speaker. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, there you
We
go.
have Tim Wright, who's gonna say a few words to Valentino and to the audience. Go ahead, Tim.
All right. Good evening. I just wanted to congratulate Valentino Dixon personally on behalf of myself and my wife. Congratulate him on his successfully proving his innocence after 27 years of wrongful incarceration. And I appreciate that you're giving me an opportunity and others like myself still wrongfully incarcerated to speak up. Because it's critical that those who have proved their innocence speak out loudly about the injustices in the American criminal justice system and reach back to help those left behind. I'm looking forward to hearing about the next chapter for you in your life and how you plan to use your experiences to change the world. I appreciate this opportunity and wish you the best. And I hope that there may be something, even while I'm still in this situation and still fighting to prove my innocence, that I could potentially help others or help those that are out on the outside fighting for us to further this cause. So I appreciate this opportunity, and I wish you the best on your continued journey in life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Keep him on the line. And now we have Kenneth Bond, who I should say is my former student from Jessup Correctional Institution and someone I consider a dear friend. Kenneth? Oh, speaker? It's not on speaker. Okay, Kenneth, you're on.
Yes, sir. Okay. How you doing, Valentino? I just want to say congratulations, and I know I never met you, but I do feel like that we share kinsmanship, and not just from being in here for so many years, and only a person who has experienced that know what that's like. So, I know on that level we share kinsmanship, but, going through this experience with Georgetown and Mark and Marty and all the students, Cassidy, and just, I'm happy for you. And I know this had ripple effects not only with you, but your entire family and, how you change your children's lives. And, I admire how you, made your own way and grew your talent. And, I'm just pleasure to know you and a pleasure to be part of this whole thing with you.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. And you can stay on the line. Was he on first or no? Okay. Unfortunately, we thought we had John Moss III, but we don't have him on the line right now. If he does call in, of course, we'll bring him on. Valentino, I want to give you, I can leave this mic here. I want to give you a chance, I think you can stay seated, to respond to Tim, to Kenneth, based on what you heard, based on being part of this team project. Can they hear me? Can they hear you? Yeah. Yeah, why don't you bring the phone up so you can speak closer to them too? Okay. Aaliyah, can you bring the phone up too?
All right.
Oh, he can hear? Okay, if that's okay, then he can hear.
This is Tim.
Tim. Hey, Tim.
Oh, you're on speaker.
Oh, sorry about that. Tim.
Yes, sir. How's it going?
I'm doing good. We coming to get you. All right? Here.
Put it near here so he can hear.
Okay.
So we can hear him.
Okay. We need you to hang in there, Tim, because we're coming to get you out of there. All right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we won't stop fighting until it happens.
I appreciate that. It's quite amazing to have somebody who's gotten out and still is fighting for those left behind, because it's not very many that do that, so I appreciate that.
Well, I got you. And this whole university has you also.
Kenneth, I'm going to put you on with Valentino in a second.
You just hang in there. It won't be long. Just hang in there.
I definitely will.
And I'm going to write you also. All right?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to write you a letter. Once I get your details, I'm going to write you a letter.
That would be great. I would enjoy corresponding.
And I know that you've heard a lot of promises, you know, that hasn't been fulfilled. So I'm not going to make a lot of promises, but I'm going to tell you one thing. We're going to get you out of there.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right.
And now we're going to talk to Kenneth.
Kenneth.
Thanks, Tim.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm all right. I'm doing all right. But my heart, you hear me? My heart is hurting for you guys. You know, and I know what you're going through. All right, and we're going to share your story with the world, and we're going to get your story out there, and we're going to force them to do the right thing. We're not going to accept no. We're not going to accept no. All right? So please just hang in there. Please just hang in there because we're going to get you out of there. Now, I love you. And you hear me? And even though I never met you, let me say this. Even though I never met you, I love you. You hear me? Right. All right. I hear you. Okay.
Okay. I think now is a good time to open it up to the audience. We have a microphone. Yeah. Sure. As people line up to ask questions, Marty has a good idea, which is to update you on the other 3 cases.
So while Valentino is sitting here, the other students had such a great level of success that Kenneth Bond is now represented by the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project and the law firm of Cooley.
And he had nothing before, no legal representation. His case was dormant, dead.
Tim
now
Wright,
we have a top-notch law firm in the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project.
Tim Wright's case, Emily Munn and Aiken Gump have agreed to investigate and take on his case. And John Moss's case is currently being reviewed by the Innocence Project. So before our class started and before our students started working on it, they had 0 going for them. Now every one of them has
a real
hope, a real chance, great lawyers. And you know, the only one we're waiting for is the Innocence Project, but I'm confident that they're going to take it because Barry Scheck spoke to our class and he agreed to commit a half hour. And he spent about 2 hours speaking to the John Moss group and the Kenneth Bond group. And instead of Barry speaking to the group, what I would say he did was he interrogated them, asking them every question you could imagine, every angle that I think a lawyer like Barry would do when he was trying to determine if it was a case worthy of taking. And our students nailed about 95% of the questions, and that 5% is because when he started asking legal questions, we had to remind Barry they're undergraduate students.
Yeah. Okay, we have a line that's forming. Please identify yourself briefly and say who your question's for.
Hi, I'm Hannah. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your story, and welcome home to Georgetown.
Thanks for having me.
I was wondering, so you spoke a little bit about the coming out and the technology and how that's, you know, been kind of a challenge, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about just more broadly the culture shock. You know, I think everybody expects you to be like overjoyed when you come out and just super grateful, but like you've said, you know, there's a lot of other emotions that come into play, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that.
Well, to be honest with you, it haven't been a culture shock for me. While I was in prison, I had a 8-inch TV that we could buy for $149. And, you know, I would observe what was going on out in society. At the same time, my mind was always out in society and not in the jail, you know, and this is what, you know, helped me walk right out of here and really get right into things without having no real problems. Only this phone that she bought me. You know, other than that, you know, I wasn't surprised because, you know, I kept my mind on the outside 90% of the time, and the other 10% was because I needed to know what was going on inside of the jail.
You know, some guys, you know, they spend 90% of their time doing jail stuff. You know, I totally separated myself from that. And you know, I was blessed. Not everybody, you know, is blessed to have that strength. So I'm very grateful that God gave that to me.
I used to have a philosophy, I don't live in prison, I'm temporarily residing there. I would joke that I'm at the school of hard knocks. It was a way to cope with the fact that I was temporarily there. And I hear Valentino, and it's essentially the same thing, that we didn't live in prison. Yeah. We were physically there, and we knew that eventually we would be removed from that environment. So we weren't going to get into the whole institutional mental state where we would decorate our cells, we would get comfortable. Our goal was get out.
Let me give you a good example. I'm from Buffalo, New York. There's a place called the Chop House. They're supposed to sell the best steak in Buffalo. So I would see these commercials all the time. So I always fantasized about having this steak, okay? And I would fantasize about going to England and Paris, all these things. This is where my mind stayed. So anyway, last night, before I came here, I had that steak that I fantasized about, okay? You know, and it was everything that I had always dreamed of and wanted.
Yeah. Next question.
Hi, my name is Michael Williams. I'm a senior writer for a golf website called Golf WRX. I've been in the business for about 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I want to say, Max, to you, congratulations on the single best golf story that I have ever seen. To Valentino, again, the person that you are and that you have become, my heart hurts for what happened to you. But when I see your dignity and your focus on reform rather than revenge, it makes me want to be a better person with the freedom that I have. So thank you for that. My question is, I have a question and an invitation, actually. Okay. The question is, 27 years of a 39-year sentence?
Yes, yes.
I always hear so much about sentences where convictions lead to sentences where they don't serve as much as that of a sentence. Why did you serve so much of that sentence?
New York State's laws are some of the harshest laws in the country, okay? You know, you have states where you have a day for a day. So even if you convicted of a crime that you didn't commit, say you get a sentence of 30 years. In some states, you may do 12, you know? And I've been trying to appeal to the governor of New York State to look at these examples and to change the sentencing laws and make them more lenient, okay? Norway, for example, the most that you can get for the worst crime is 21 years because they focus more on rehabilitation than punishment, you know.
Have you been reading my book that I sent you, Valentino? That's in there. Sounds like it.
Come on, you're giving me away. So it's you know, if I would have been in some of these other states, instead of doing the 27 years, I might have did 13, and that would have been a lot easier for me and my family to cope with. You know, I think all the laws across the country should be the same, not this state over here, same crime, same charge, but you're going to get 30 years over here, and then the parole board may not even allow you to leave after that during the 30 years. I know guys that's done 40 years on a 20-year sentence because the parole board refuses to grant them parole. You know, and you have to ask yourself, is this job security? Do we need to keep the numbers up? You know, I know a guy named John McKenzie. He got denied parole 10 times, meaning he did an extra 20 years. So the 10th time, at the age of 70 years old, he committed suicide. Okay, so these are the things that I believe that's, you know, fixable immediately, you know, to make the system a lot more fair. Because people, we know the system is not designed to give the poor person a fair trial. Then you have 1% statistically that are innocent. So out of 2.3 million people, that's 23,000 people that's actually innocent of a crime they didn't commit. So when you factor in all of those statistics and those issues, chronic unemployment, poverty, economic collapse, these things lead to crime and punishment. And you have to, look at a person's background and where they grew up at and where they came from and the underlying factors of why, people end up in prison. And then you have to consider that and say, you know what? Let's lighten these sentencing laws because of these factors.
And the invitation is this. Now, golf didn't save my life, but it certainly changed my life. Been talking to a couple of people, texting while we've been sitting here, and I don't know if you've been on a golf course yet, if you have a set of golf clubs, if you've ever had lessons, or if you've ever had your first round of golf, but all of those are on us. So if you'd have me and your family...
This is my guy right here.
Yeah, we're going to go play soon.
Next month,
They have a deal.
We would love to get you out for a round of golf sometime, just to experience that, though, at the end.
Well, I'll see you
golf to play. A lot of golf to
I'll
play.
see you afterwards.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Hi, my name is Lorinda. My question was, earlier you said that there'd be days that you could feel strong one day, and then the next there'd be some people that'd be able to just snap. So clearly just the conditions in the prison system are atrocious, but I was wondering whether you'd be able to discuss in any more detail of how psychologically you're morphed on a day-to-day.
Well, just imagine, right? You in prison for a crime you didn't commit. So, like I mentioned in the documentary, but they didn't show that part, I was like I was doing double time, okay? And you have these dehumanizing conditions, first of all. I was so grateful to God that I didn't get sick or I needed medical attention, because the medical attention is horrible. If you have a heart attack or a stroke, forget about it. They're not going to get you to the hospital for another 3 hours, if then. So any type of treatment that you need, forget about it. The worst treatment in the world, the most unhealthy food, it's all processed. In New York State, all the food is processed, soy, no real protein at all. And I was thankful that I had a family that sent me funds so that I could order out to vendors and have some canned goods sent in, stuff like that. But most of all, we need to change this. We need to do something about it. So all of these factors that I'm speaking of, coupled with the harsh sentencing laws, it's just not right. It's just not right.
Sorry, I'm going to have to raise this up a little bit. My name is Alex Buffone. I'm a junior at Georgetown here. And a popular class often taken by freshmen is called The Problem of God, in which the professor challenges your belief in God. So I'm wondering, after spending 27 years in prison, was probably the best challenge to your beliefs. I just wonder if you could talk a bit about that, and after being in prison for so long, if it ever made you question your beliefs or strengthened it at all.
Okay. Well, prayer played a big part in my survival. I wasn't a big believer in God, but I had to grow spiritually in order to survive. And back to, you said Lucinda, not Lorinda, okay. Back to her question it's good with yours also. The answer is that in prison, you're really on borrowed time, okay? And I was aware of this after seeing not seeing it, but several of my friends committed suicide. Where I had spoken to those guys an hour before they committed suicide or a day before they committed suicide. And so I was aware of this. I knew that the mind was fragile, so I had to really be careful. And I've always been strong-minded, strong-willed, but even I was in jeopardy, of snapping or whatever, And when the golf came along, it was so instrumental in keeping my spirit strong, because I was on borrowed time, 10, 20 years, and you just like, listen, the devil can get inside your head, and any type of thoughts might come in there, and you say, like just end this right now, And I was just so grateful that, I had these positive forces to keep me on the right track.
My
Hello.
name's Cole. I'm in Professor Howard's class this semester, and we talked a little bit about how a lot of exonerees don't receive any kind of compensation once they're released from prison. I was wondering if there have been any updates in terms of your case, in terms of like a settlement from the state.
Well, let me just say this. I have civil attorneys working on the lawsuit. That hasn't been my focus, and it never will be. If I'm compensated, then that's good, But what I did was for 20-something years, I studied business. I did a lot of reading. I've read almost 1,000 books. So I believe I'm going to do pretty well without the state's money.
Hey, good evening. I'd just like to thank Georgetown and the Lecture Fund, Professor Howard, Ellie, the students that all made this happen. Mr. Dixon, incredible story, the optimism, the hope, it's definitely there. You've talked a lot about praying and the golf art and how that helped you get through your experiences. And it's really easy to kind of look at this big picture, 27 years, innocent man in prison. But I'm more interested in, were there things that you did on a day-to-day basis, maybe something like a routine? You talked about trying to stay in shape, along with the art and the prayer that kind of kept you motivated, like kept your strength alive, kept you mentally active?
Yeah, well, I had the same routine, believe it or not, for the last 20 years I was there. Same routine. I'm up at 5:30 in the morning, making a prayer, drawing for about 6 hours. Then whenever they would run the prison yard in the afternoon, I would go out and work out for an hour, make a phone call. Then I would come back in, take a shower, and draw for another 2 to 3 hours. And maybe read for another 2 hours. So I was always busy. And whenever, I caught the flu a few times and I was really sick. I mean, I couldn't get out of the bed, and I'm like this drawing, And I felt like if I took a day off, then I would be losing in some sense. I was so hard on myself that I needed to push myself to beyond the limit of what I could achieve.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
I can't reach this. I'm a little short. I would like to first say my name is Karen Mills, and I'm from Bristol, Pennsylvania. And I came out tonight because I think it was around September 22nd, I sent Marty an email on Twitter. And I was on the phone with my fiance, John Brookins, when we got the news that you were released. I was watching it on the news in the morning, and I was talking to him in the morning. He's in Phoenix, SCI Phoenix in Philadelphia. And I shared your story with him a couple of years ago when Valentina was working on your change.org petition. And we had some words back and forth, some inspirational words. She's a very beautiful child. And you're very fortunate to have her, I'm sure, just as well as she's fortunate to have you.
Yes, I am.
But tonight I just want to say I'm thankful that you are being a pillar of strength for those that are still inside. I ask you tonight, you say full court press, so I told Marty that I would send the information. He said, send the information about John. So I called my friend in California who's a paralegal, and I said, I need help. So she's here. She came, she's been here for the last month. We've been compiling his information, and I brought it with me.
Okay.
And Marty, if it's okay with you, I'd like to hand it over to you tonight. And Valentino, I wish to stay in communication and just to let you know that I'm very thankful for what you're doing. And I believe that one day John will be standing up here with you as well.
Okay, I'll give you my number before I leave.
Thank you.
All right.
God bless you.
God bless you too. Because without people like you, I wouldn't be here.
I'm Dr. Mark B. Hubble. I'm from Manassas, Virginia. Just want to say congratulations, first of all, Valentina, for being out here. I spent over 16 years in the West Virginia prison system with people such as Brian Ferguson, Jimmy Gardner.
Let me stop you.
John Moss, yes.
I know who you are.
You friended me on Facebook
right.
about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
But there's one thing, I
Right.
mean, I know the harsh conditions. I know the mindset when you can take yourself out of prison
Right.
and you didn't have a problem transitioning back into society.
Right.
I know there's a few hiccups here and there. It took me, I've still had this phone for 2 years and still can't figure out how to use a lot of the apps on it.
Right.
But what you share in common with John and Jimmy and Brian, and you mentioned it earlier about the clemency versus the maintaining your innocence. And what I want to know, and I think some other people in here might want to know too, is were you willing to die in prison always claiming your innocence versus claiming some type of guilt to get out into freedom again?
Well, for the first 20 years.
Did you have a time limit, like after 30 or
well,
50,
Well, let me just say this. For the first 20-something years, I always said that if I'm not exonerated totally, I'll stay in a prison cell, okay? My grandmother is 90 years old. So within the last year, I became desperate, and I said, before they came on board, I said, let's just try to get me out of here any type of way so that I can spend time with grandma, and that's, you have to think about those that love you and those that you love, because it's not about you now, and I had to swallow my pride to even consider the clemency thing, okay, and but God had other plans. You see how it worked out?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm, like you guys were, an exchange student here. And I want to reiterate what you guys were saying about how perhaps coming from another system, the shock of the injustices kind of maybe hits you harder. But I wanted to ask a question to you guys, actually, about approaching the case and the way that the injustices are communicated. Did it ever strike you that it was hard to strike a balance between communicating these things and making them captivating so that people listen, and then also the risk of sort of trivializing it and turning what is someone's real life and real problems and struggles into sort of entertainment? And that's the debate I've been having with some other people about, the rise of true crime and how people enjoy watching it, but the difficulty about making it not just a drama and recognizing that it's a real issue as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting question. I think in terms of us, when we made our documentary, I don't think we felt like we were sensationalizing anything, because it was so just inherently dramatic. I think just reading about this case, there's so many twists and turns and everything's so unexpected that I didn't think we felt like we were sensationalizing it. I think that is definitely a concern. I think with us as well, when we were putting it out there on social media, we had such help from Max and from Tina that we didn't feel like we needed to catch someone's attention in a more superficial way, that we already had a great base and that we just needed to build on that. I think some of the other cases maybe struggle more because they didn't have that natural public attention. But I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, but it's definitely a problem that we faced a bit, because people don't want to hear about innocent cases, because they're always thinking, what if they're murderers, and what if they get out and start killing people? So a lot of people just started getting interested when Valentino got out. But when they're in prison and when you actually need their help, that's when it's extremely difficult to get attention, and that's definitely a problem we face too.
If I could just add, I work in entertainment, technically. Golf Digest, it's a leisure magazine for people to read when they're not focusing on the more difficult things in their life. And it was never a goal or a motivation to sensationalize this or kind of, pull on the strings of narrative. I think our job in journalism or storytelling, which then quickly kind of morphs into entertainment, is just to present things in a plain way that it can be accessible to a general audience. And what I found in the law and maybe other people find in the law or other, specialized subjects is that it can kind of be full of jargon and it can kind of seem quite overly technical. So, the goal is not to sensationalize, but just to tell things in a way that the widest number of people can understand them.
We actually had Lonnie Sori, who is a public relations communications expert, come down and really instruct the students on how to tell these stories. Lonnie's worked on a lot of wrongful conviction cases, and he said, what is at the core of each one of these? It's humanity. And he said, what is Valentino? Forget aside that he was wrongfully convicted. What is he? He's a father, he's a son, he's a grandfather, he's an artist. He said, focus on telling on each one of these cases who the individuals are as people first, before you even get to why they're in prison, which will gravitate, people will gravitate to that because they'll have that connection.
Hello, my name is Justin. I'm a freshman in the college. I just have a very simple question for you and Marty. What is freedom to you?
Freedom. So it really is the ability to do whatever you want in life. I was released on December 27, 2007, and on January 3rd, 2009, so just about a year later, I was on a plane going to Italy to do a semester abroad. And for me, freedom really, there was a one defining moment where I was walking around Venice, and I just said to myself, I'm free. And I walked on somebody's property, it was probably some private property, and I was overlooking the water, and I just kind of sat down, and I go, oh my God, I'm really free. And it wasn't that I didn't know I was free. It was one of those moments where it hits you, that here I was in a foreign country, finishing up my bachelor's degree, doing things that like a normal 27-year-old should be doing, but I wasn't, I was 37. And since then, freedom for me has been moving forward in life, getting married, adopting my daughter, teaching at Georgetown, lecturing, giving back, freeing Valentino, being part of that. And realizing that there's a lot of work ahead, but I have the freedom to do it now.
Well, for me, I'm free, but I'm not free. And I don't believe I'll be free until the justice system is fair. That's it.
First and foremost, I just like to humbly express my happiness for you regaining your freedom.
Thank you.
Also, you too, Professor, even though it's been 10 years plus, but hey. My name is Herbert Lamont Reynolds. I'm from Miami, Florida. I presently have a cousin that's incarcerated in the federal penitentiary. My question, I have a couple questions. So, my first question, I understand you was wrongfully convicted. All the same, what is your feelings towards disproportionate sentencing? And do you have any youth programs under construction?
No, not yet. We know that it takes money to even start these type of programs. You have to get the government to realize that you have to allocate certain funds, for these programs and to help save these kids' lives. Right. Martin Luther King said it best: in order to change the conditions of the people, you have to have funding. Without the funding, you can't do much. So I plan on raising money on my own through my art. I just spoke to a gentleman yesterday in Buffalo, and we're going to get things started next month, where I donate artwork, and the proceeds is going to go to a community center. So it's just one step at a time. And what I hope to do in the future is that if I'm successful, to be able to network with other successful...
When.
Huh?
Not if, but when.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. When I'm successful is to be able to network with other successful people and to get them to realize
that, it's extremely important to invest, in our youth, the generation to come, et cetera. But more importantly, without becoming too religious or whatever, because I know some people don't like to touch the religious thing. But let me just, the Bible says in Hebrews 13:13, remember those who are in prison as though in prison with them, and those who are mistreated, since you are also in the body. So it's just, getting people to understand that, we have to do more, especially if you are in a position to do more.
And then, excuse me, and then the question is also for the professors. Do you and what plans do y'all and what plans do y'all have as far as enlightened society about disproportionate sentencing and more or less reforming the judicial system in every sense?
For me, what I've done to reform the judicial system is that every opportunity I get to testify before the New York State Senate, the Assembly, the City Council, I've done it. I'm one of my other roles is I work for the Innocence Project as the Exoneree Advisory Board member.
Okay.
I think for me to change the system, Mark gave me the opportunity to start teaching at Georgetown. I also teach a wrongful conviction class at editorial law school. So for me, it is constantly doing what I'm doing, eventually being admitted to the bar and being able to represent people directly like Valentino, so I can really make even more of a difference, because there really is an under-resources, there's not enough money being spent to the work we're doing. Last year, there was probably about 160 people who were exonerated. That's with the limited amount of people who are doing it and the limited amount of money who are doing it. I've said this consistently, that if the billionaires of the world would give more money to Georgetown, to the Innocence Project, that number of exonerations would probably double. And I think what ends up happening is that every time there's an exoneration, there's also an additional discussion that says, what went wrong here? And when we focus on what went wrong in every exoneration, it helps the judicial system, because we can cure the beginning stages before someone is convicted.
And I'll give a quick answer.
Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just say this.
Sure,
real
yeah,
quick.
go ahead.
Okay. He just gave you a response that I'm not going to give you, because he can do things that I can't do.
Right.
But what I want to do is this. I want to start an organization for families of the incarcerated, okay, where the families come together and put pressure on Congress. Because you have over 2 million prisoners, okay? So if you got one family member that come and support a rally or a massive protest, okay, this seems to be the only real remedy, to get them to understand that change has to come now rather than later. Okay, so I think I'll be good in that aspect.
Okay, yeah. And I'll just answer really briefly. Let me ask, what year are you?
I'm in third year.
Okay, so you still have time. Take my prisons and punishment class next year. Right? And if you wind up on the wait list, come talk to me. We'll work something out.
Okay, cool.
Because I spend 2 days a week talking about all of those issues with all of my heart and passion, because it goes for me way beyond the issue of wrongful convictions. That's a big part, that's a core part, but there's so much more to our criminal justice system that is inhumane, that is unjust, that is racist, that needs desperate reform, and that's what we spend a lot of that class learning about. We go visit prison, and there are some students in the room that I'm taking into Jessup, where Kenneth is. Actually, I'm going to see Kenneth tomorrow on a prison visit. So consider taking these classes, because we're doing a lot, and we're doing a lot in prison, and we're bringing people inside of prisons, and we're trying to reform from within and from outside.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening. Thank you all. I'm Sheila Murphy, and I'm Chief Mobilizer for Mission to Mobilization. We're helping to change the way the nation sees returning citizens. I wanted to first thank everyone for this forum. Valentino, to you, I just want to really encourage you and thank you for your strength and for your prayer and for not giving up. I was thinking, you know, a number of things that I wanted to share, but I'm just going to share a couple of things. But I think it's really important that people understand when someone has hope, when you exemplified and modeled that hope, that you saved other people's lives. There's someone that's actually still living today that's incarcerated because you didn't give up and because they see your story. And it's unfortunate that you did lose some of your friends, but I do believe that people's lives have been saved because you continue to stand strong and believe in your faith and hold on. And so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I want to also just thank everyone that is on this panel and for the work that you've done. And this is an extraordinary, you know, feat case. But I wanted to ask Mr. Howard in particular, on maybe a psychological or even emotional level, what would be one thing that you feel like you've learned in this process that you haven't shared publicly?
About the process with Valentino specifically, or the whole course, or dealing with wrongful convictions?
No, with Valentino's.
I kind of share everything publicly, actually. I don't think I have any secrets about that, and I'm an open book. But, you know,
And it's not like it's a secret, but I'm just saying, like,
I understand, yeah, but let me answer it this way. I only met Valentino when he walked out, right? And I'd seen the videos, I'd seen all the work the students had done, I'd heard the messages he'd left, but we hadn't interacted directly. And I got to tell you that within minutes, I felt like this was going to be a friend for life. I felt a closeness, a bond, a love for this man who is so extraordinary that has just, over the ensuing weeks, has proven to be the case as we've been in touch constantly, whether it's in planning this event or in doing his website or in talking about his goals and dreams. And it makes me think back to Marty in a way. Obviously, it's very different because we knew each other when we were 3 years old. Sure. It's about as different as can be in a sense. But I have that same feeling when I told Marty in the prison visiting room when we reconnected in the middle of a sentence, and I said, I'll never give up on you, and I'll never stop doing anything I can to help you, both when you're in prison and when you get out. And it's something that I think I've held. I feel that same way about Valentino. I didn't know him during the time in prison, but I feel like I would do anything to help him at any time, and I actually feel like it's reciprocal. So there's something, you know, just extraordinary about these two human beings, both the resilience and what they've been through. But I also don't want to make them out to be so unique in the sense that, well, then everybody else in prison is bad and belongs and so on. That's quite the opposite. There are so many extraordinary people in prison, and this is the tragedy of mass incarceration, which is that we have people with talent, with intelligence, with hopes, with dreams, with just incredible things that they could contribute to our society, and they're locked away and they're separated from us, and that's a tragedy.
Thank you.
And we are almost out of time. We're pretty much out of time. I'm going to just have the last three just ask their question, and then we'll have anyone who wants to respond. And then we have one final surprise, so stay tuned for that.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm in Mr. Howard's class and maybe the class next semester as well. But thank you, first of all, for coming and sharing your story. I think especially at a place like Georgetown, most people here come from a place of immense privilege. And we need to hear that we have the power, I think, to confront these racist and oppressive systems. But I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about perhaps the relationships you had within prison. I know that you were denied for 27 years, spending day-to-day life with your family, your daughter and your mother and your grandmother and other family, of course. Do you still keep in touch with the people that you spent day-to-day life with in prison? Did you make meaningful friendships there?
Let's take each question and then you can give one final. Or do you want to give a quick
I'm going to answer
response?
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I have about 50 guys, their name and numbers, addresses, on about 5 or 6 pieces of paper.
In fact, I've written about 20 letters since I've been out. In the midst of all of this craziness, getting 3 hours of sleep some nights since I've been out. These guys, and I've sectored the calls. I put money on my phone to collect calls from prison. So all of them can call me at any given time, So yeah, I've kept in touch. And in fact, outside of the prisoner, my counselor at Attica for 15 years, me and him went out to dinner last week. So I'm never gonna lose touch with those guys,
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Vaughn, and I graduated 2 years ago in 2017, and now I teach math, high school math, in a low-income community here in DC. My question is, what message would you have for students like mine who grew up where they at least know somebody, or they have a direct family member who is in prison or went to prison?
Well, what I would like to say to the future lawyers, judges, prosecutors that may be in this room is that a good lawyer helps those who can't help themselves, but a great lawyer stands up against all in the name of justice. So anybody that's thinking about becoming a lawyer, stick to your core value, no matter how the system may behave or what you see, because there's somebody like me sitting in the prison cell that's going to need your help, okay? And the forces that be is going to try to turn you around, to their advantage. So stay strong no matter what. Fight the good fight to the bitter end. For a future judge or prosecutor, just try to never forget that people are people and people make mistakes, and we all make mistakes. And God, I don't believe, will show mercy to anyone who doesn't show mercy to other fellow beings, okay? So we have to have compassion, sympathy, empathy, forgiveness. These are the things that make us understanding human beings.
Okay, we're going to have one last question very briefly because we're over time.
Good evening, how are you?
All
A little
right.
bit emotionally stirred. My name is Kareem Sterling. I'm a former legal professional, also MA 4926007. I'm a returning citizen.
And now at Georgetown Hoya in the paralegal program.
Yes. And so tonight I'm so full and overwhelmed. To hear from Marty, to hear from Valentino, I've had to fight back tears throughout the evening, just to hear the smallest gestures, like when you told the gentleman you'll write him a letter and the value of that letter, and expressing your love to him. I know he didn't say he loved you back. He might have been around a whole bunch of dudes who are hardcore. He couldn't express that. But I'm going to let you know tonight, I love you, brother.
I love you too.
And I love everyone on this stage. And so Mark alluded to my involvement with the Georgetown Paralegal Fellowship through the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens Affairs. I'm part of that cohort, along with some other men and women who are here this evening. Right, so you have that program, and then coming into that program, I studied and learned that Mark and Marty teach a class together here at Georgetown. And then, in furtherance of that, I found out that there's the Georgetown DC Jail Initiative. And in furtherance of that, there's the full Georgetown Prison and Justice Initiative, which this exoneration initiative is at the forefront. My question is to Mark and others on the stage: mass incarceration, prison reform, criminal justice, crime itself is such a taboo topic that no one wants to touch, right? It's something that people stay away from. It's something that is deemed wrong, criminal, dangerous in our society. Why do you men have the bravery to step forward and even get involved in this area? What is it that made you want to take an interest in a demographic that the rest of society deems as the worst of the worst?
It's a great question, Kareem.
Lovey-dovey preschool, I think.
Yeah. No, I would say, when your eyes are open to injustice, you can't close them again. You can't unlearn when you see it, when you feel it, when you meet people, when you care about them. You can't just turn that off and go back. And so not only have I not turned it off and gone back, but I've gone forward, and I want to bring people, and I want to be a part of this larger movement to combat that very stereotype, that very mountain that you're talking about. And I think we're moving in that right direction. I think at Georgetown, we have something really special. I think we have something that's unique among universities, and I think we're going to keep going full speed ahead. And you're a part of that too, Kareem.
I mean, for me, is that I saw enough heartache and horror in prison, and there's enough people that I know that didn't belong there. And some of them were guilty, but they didn't belong there because they needed treatment, not incarceration. They needed somebody to guide them early on in their life, and people failed them. So for me, getting involved and not turning back is just ingrained in me. I also, part of it is because there were so many lawyers, investigators, public relations people that got involved in my life to fight for me. For me, it's a way to give back to them, to show that all the thousands of hours that they spent on my life, I can pay it forward and spend on other people's lives.
Yeah, that's great. Let's clap. But don't leave yet, and I know we're over time, but we have just in from Mount Olive Correctional Complex in West Virginia, John Moss III. John, you're on live. We can hear you.
Oh, hello?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yes. Who am I talking to?
This is Mark right here, and we got Valentino Dixon, and we got a full house.
Oh, I'm sorry that I was late. I got my days mixed up. I'm thinking it's going to be December the 1st. Here I am sitting over here at the table doing the Sudoku, and, time is passing by. But,
You're here now, so that's good.
Yeah.
You're going to close down the event for us, actually, so it's perfect.
Excuse me?
You're going to close down the event for us. We're just about at the end, so you're going to kind of get the last word, and then Valentino will back to you. So is there something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I wanted to say congratulations to Valentino. I'm glad he made it out there. I'm looking forward to meeting you. So you and I and the rest of the exonerees can stand in solidarity and fight against the wrongful convictions around the country. It is my plan. It is my hope. It is my prayer that one day that we can do this together. I am looking forward to it. I understand your fight. Your fight has been my fight, and it is the people that are there with you, that honor you, that helped me a lot. It's hard to explain, but I am very happy for you and your family, and just stay strong, continue to fight, and my prayers and everything is with you. And I congratulate Georgetown on the fine work that they have done. All the guys, the students, Mark, Marty, Alex, Jessica, who am I forgetting?
Maddie.
Oh, man. I'm bad with names.
Hey, John.
Everybody. Yeah.
I'm going to say, whoa. I don't need to say anything.
38 years.
Right.
38 years.
The power of your spirit is coming through this phone.
Oh, man.
You hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Your day is coming. With that type of spirit, you're going to win, my friend.
Yeah,
it's going to happen.
Yes, it is. I'm going to claim this. I'm looking forward to it. We can do this together. It's many people across the country, man, that had the same problem. Having the same problem with you and I, me and women, around this country. And they need people like you, Brian, Jimmy, myself, the University of Georgetown. They need us. you know, I'm not a one for doing a lot of talking, but, you know, you have me hyped right now.
Well, let me just say this. The reason I said whoa, because he sounds just like me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can feel it, man. You know, I feel myself getting there. Where you at? I'm getting closer. You know, things in my life are just different. You know.
Right.
And you know, I'm excited about it. I'm excited, and you know, I'm just looking forward to starting a new life, starting a new life. You know, I haven't had any of that for almost 40 years. 40 years, and I haven't given up hope. You know, I will never give up hope. You know, for the rest of my life, you know, I'm going to do this fight. I'm in it with you, and you know, we can do this together.
You know, this is. Hold on, John. This is the voice of an innocent man.
Yeah, I know.
You can tell.
Yeah.
38 years.
Right. 38 years. You know, it's just unthinkable. So I want to get your details, right? And I want to write you. All right. At the same time, I would like you to write out the issues that you believe that could be helpful for us to fight this mass incarceration.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, most definitely. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I'm in the process now of writing Rob and Cindy. You know, they're doing great work with us too through Georgetown, and she's doing a book on you and I. You know, she spoke up to him. She gave me your message, and yes, I look forward to meeting you. And you know, and I'm writing them too. So you know, most definitely.
You hear me, John? I stay in contact with them. We speak on a regular.
Yeah,
so,
I'm trying to get them on my phone list now.
Okay. All right, we got to wrap it up, John. All right, I love you, John, and I can't wait to meet you.
Yeah, I love you too, and I look forward to meeting you. And like I said, keep the fight going, and congratulations to you and your family. And thank Georgetown for all they are doing and continue to do in the name of justice. God bless you.
God bless you, John. Love you.
Thank you, John. I'm going to put you back to Alex. And now, to close out the event, thank you for your patience, but I think you'll agree that it was worth it. You know, Valentino, we said, welcome home. You're a Hoya. We want you to leave when you go back to Buffalo to be properly equipped as a Georgetown Hoya. So you got your new Georgetown University sweatshirt. You got a hat. And a Georgetown Golf t-shirt. Thank you all so much. And another round of applause for Valentino Dixon.